Now we're going to talk about actual tissue processing with the processor. I had some tissue here that I was doing a little experiment on that I had been saving. I didn't have any numbered tissue, but we'll just handle it as we can. Again, I use the KP Marker Plus. The KP Marker Plus, it makes it all the way through the reagents very nicely. And it also does the same with the pencil. If you use a pencil, just to prevent smearing and stuff, label two sides with the pencil, and just in case one side smears a little bit. It won't smear during processing, it'll smear during your handling it or scraping the box later, possibly. Never, ever use a Sharpie or any other type of marker you think says histo marker or whatever. Be real careful with it, because if it comes off in 95% alcohol, it's going to come off on all the chemical reagents in the processor. So if you're not sure, just simply use a pencil. Okay, now since I'm doing just a couple pieces of tissue just for your demonstration, I don't need a bigger container. I'll just use the lid. But I do have up on top of the fire cabinet a tray, if you're doing a large container of samples and stuff, that you can set the basket into. That's okay, I'll do it in a minute. So since I don't have an actual number, I don't like having tissue that doesn't have an actual number, but this was just for my own purposes, and Lisa and them were kind enough to give me some scrap tissue. So I'm going to put just random tissue. Actually, I know what the tissue is, so I think I'll label it a little bit better. So I'll put a question mark and I'll put kidney. And I'll put on this one, since I know that there's testes in there, I'll put testes. And I'll put for Donna on the side. And it's a test tissue. So I'm just kind of labeling it with something. And we'll do a third one. I'm going to throw this one away. And that's something to know too. If you're numbering cassettes, and if you make a mistake, let's say you write a 6 or write something and it's the wrong number, don't go over it like that. Don't do that. Throw that kind of a cassette away. It's not worth it, because then it leads to questioning of the number, and it can lead to mix-ups of your tissue type and stuff like that. Just throw the cassette away, and don't ever do that on slides or anything either. It's much better to have a very clearly labeled cassette. So in this case, I'm going to have liver. I'm going to put test tissue. Now this was a fixative test, so I'm going to even make a notation of that. This was actually unfixed. So, test little fix. Because I did a real short fixation on it. Liver, it's going to be a test, short, fix. Donna. Anyway, the basic, you get the idea. You just want to be clearly labeling it. So this is a test of underfixation. It was just some tissue that we were trying out. Okay. So I have a kidney, so grab a kidney here. Since this is test tissue, what I want to do is I'm going to have one whole one just to see what happens. And I'm going to have one that I slice. And I had some razor blades. I don't want this tissue to dry out, so I'm trying to move quickly. So I'm going to take this and slice it. I'm just going to slice it in half. It's kind of slippery. Get it in there. It's drying and it's not good for it. Okay, here's a liver piece of tissue. I'm gonna, these were under fixation test, so I'm gonna cut it. You can see it's still a little raw in the middle. So I know that it's under fixed, and I cut the purpose of this test for me, I'm going to show you processing, but I was wanting to show what the tissue looked like when the alcohol is on a processor, fix it rather than formalin. What does that tissue look like? And I thought that would be a nice way to show it. So I'll throw this tissue on. So it's sliced. Now when you put tissue in the cassette, you want to make sure that it never extends above this. You want it to be able to move freely in the cassette. And you do not want to let it be drying out. So I'm trying to get this going quickly. And I said I had a testes here. So we'll get one of those out of my bucket. I'll do a whole testes. And again, these are all under fixed, so tissue. And that'll be enough to get us started and have something. Okay, so now we're going to go turn to the processor. Since I have my cassettes. Oops. I'm going to open this processor up. So you saw me, I slid the bar to the left, I brought the clamps down and lifted up. Now you can see after the clean cycle, it's left a lot of moisture here. That's from the alcohol and xylene purge. Most of this is alcohol, but it's going to have some residual, slightest little bit of xylene in it. So you really have to wipe that all off. You don't want this to start getting into this brand new formalin that we just put on the machine. So makes sense. We'll get this all wiped up. After it does its clean cycle, if you know, you can also just give it a quick wipe and then leave this open and let it kind of dry out too. Now remember, I put those cassettes in there to get nice and clean, and there you can see they're very nice and clean from that purge cleaning. So we'll take those out, and I'll put those back in the embedding center in a little bit. And this is our basket, our tissue basket. And I cleaned my forceps. You can see they're nice and clean. Very good. And then wipe out this reservoir. Remember I said the formalin leaves like a white film and stuff, so give that a wipe out also. Now down in this tank here, in this reservoir, there is a filter. Now every once in a while you just kind of want to take a look at that and make sure those holes are not clogged with buffer from formalin. If you do, you just take this out with the screen and then brush it and clean it. That probably happens, that filter getting clogged. Maybe it starts happening maybe like once a year or so. You start noticing it. Okay. Now, I don't want my tissue drying out while I'm demonstrating all these other things to everybody. So what I'm going to do is we're going to kind of pretend for temporarily here and then I'll load my tissue in a minute. So what you want to do is you want to have your basket, and you're going to load it up with tissue cassettes. I like to face them the same way in the basket for them to have even flow all the way through. So you take your cassetted tissue that's been fixed. You want to make sure it's adequately fixed, because if you haven't fixed it long enough, this processor will fix it and you won't have good results if it's alcohol fixed on the processor. Now we have several of these dividers. You can have a whole row of tissue here. I put 18 per row, and you can see you can have more. Now I don't have enough dividers for both baskets, but if you happen to have enough tissue, like you had 200, you would fill each basket up. When we were doing our high throughput study with ENU, we actually would have both of these baskets completely filled. So you'd fill up all the rows, 18 each row. Then you'd have this. Now for this one, the second one, you would set it on top. And it loosely just sits on top. Fits in the little groove there. And you'd have to put one on that side and one on this side, and then just fill the rows in between just with the cassettes. And then you put on the lid. And you'd have both in there. You'd put the first one in with all the cassettes lined up. Then you would put the second one on top of that. Just set it right on top. It doesn't have to be perfect. Because what that does, it will hold down the cassettes, and then this will hold down the ones. You don't want to forget to put this on. Otherwise your cassettes will float. Then what you would do is close the lid, latch it, slide the bar to the right, because it's not going to let you do anything unless you slide the bar to the right. Okay, so now we've got all our tissue in there, hypothetically. I don't need both baskets all dirty, so I'm going to take this other one out. If you just have one basket, you're just going to put the rows in that you need. Let's say you only have enough tissue for 2 rows. Well, what you're going to have to do is, for the top to be balanced, you're going to have to put a row here and a row at that end, so the top will stay balanced. Okay, so now we've got our tissue in. We're going to put the lid on. Our cassettes are all lined up the same way. Put the lid on. Close this. Now, I'm kind of picky about having those cassettes all facing the same way. Does it really matter? Maybe not so much. I know his technician from another lab that just kind of puts them all in there any which way, and she has good results. So I'm latching it, and I'm sliding it to the right. Now back here, and I always keep this here. You don't ever want to lose it. You don't ever want to carry this off someplace or put it someplace else. This is a magnet, and it's right behind this thing, always in the same spot. What this magnet does is that's what lets you be able to program or do anything or start this machine. Why they chose this magnet with this company was they didn't want someone to be able to come to this machine and touch buttons and change anything while a process tissue was running. Especially for a clinical lab with human tissue running and biopsies dependent on that, they didn't want some cleaning person or somebody to be able to change or do anything. So it took this magnet to be physically placed on there to be able to change anything. What you're going to do with the magnet is you're going to put it on program, and that's going to allow you to give it a start. I have a sheet of paper on the side of this machine. I think I have one also in this book. I do. The sheet of paper on the side of the machine is exactly like this one, except I have 70% alcohol here. I just haven't changed it yet. Okay. I have all these schedules different schedules, up to 10 different processing schedules. These processing schedules actually pretty closely correspond to the processing schedules that the core lab has. So if anybody has any questions about their tissue and stuff like that, you can consult with Bernice or somebody over at the core lab, and they should be able to help you out, since I tried to pretty closely duplicate what they have going on. Anyway, I've put the magnet there, and I'm going to select one of these processing schedules. So for my tissue, let's say it was that liver and the kidney and stuff like that, I'm going to choose the number 3. Now, if it were just kind of smaller testes, like mid-sized, smaller, let's say I cut those kidneys into 4s or something like that, and I felt it was going to have good penetration, I would go to this 30-minute per station schedule. If it's really, really tiny stuff, embryonic gonads, ovaries, things like that, I would do 25 minutes per schedule. If I want to do an immediate start on the processor, for an immediate start, I put the magnet on there, I select which one I want. Actually, I want 3, but let's just say I wanted something different. I'm going to use this orange program button down here, and I'm going to push it to the desired program number that I want. And I happen to want 3. Now, if you have any concern whether this matches up to what's actually going on, all the schedule here, you can actually check it by this verify button. So it's station 1 is 1 hour, 2 hours, station 3 is 3 hours, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. It's showing you that it's all 1 hour. The only one that will have nothing will be our paraffin. The first paraffin, number 11, should say nothing because that's our reserve paraffin. You don't have to verify this. I have it all programmed in. You don't need to, but I'm just showing you this for your information. Should you need to change a program or want to do something different, consult the manual that we have. Okay, if I want to do an immediate start, I can see that this, I have it set here, this is a 13-hour schedule. The pump-ins and pump-outs actually will add another about 40 minutes onto this time, so it'd be about 13 hours and 40 minutes. So if I want an immediate start, I would push and hold this button. First, I remove the magnet, then it's got the start lit up. And I would push and hold this until it starts, and it'll go beep, and then it'll start. If I made a mistake, I can just do nothing and it'll turn off. So I'm going to push and hold it. That's an immediate start. 13 hours, 40 minutes later, this processing will be done. Now it's going through, it's cycling through, and it's showing you, again, every station and its times. And then what you're going to see down here is you're going to see the tap water is going to start like bubbling to create pressure. It's going to make a little bit of a whirring noise, and then it's going to start bubbling that tap water, and then you know it's good and it's going. See, it's bubbling? And you'll see the pump in light. Let's pump it in the formalin. So 3 things you're going to see. You're going to see that start bubbling, you're going to see the pump in light, and you're going to see the formalin start going down. Now let's say I have some programs on here that have no formalin, because some tissues and some investigators, they don't want it longer fixed in formalin, and they've actually stored their tissue in 70%. So these last programs that have 00 in the formalin are for that purpose, if somebody wants to run a schedule with no formalin. The thing about this is, you can't do a delayed start on these programs. If you do a delayed start, this machine always stores the always does the delayed start and does the holding in the very first reagent. And of course, the very first reagent on our processor happens to be formalin. So if you select one of these and you don't want formalin, you can't do a delayed start. What you'd have to do to overcome that would be to temporarily swap out the formalin for 70% alcohol, put a piece of tape on there and let you, as a reminder, telling everybody that you've done that. If you want to do a delayed, like weekend start or whatever, and you didn't want it in formalin. For our purposes in our lab, for just about everything, it starting in the formalin really hurts nothing. Okay, so now it's going. Something to know also about these processors, you'll see it going. Now I have it set up on certain programs between vacuum, pressure, and ambient. If you ever needed to add tissue into this chamber, like it's like, oh darn, I found some more tissue, it can be processed this day. You never want to open this unless this light says ambient. And it, every 30 seconds to a minute or so, it, depending upon if I've set it up with vacuum and pressure, it will go back and forth to vacuum. It'll give it a little vacuum. It'll give it a little pressure for another minute or two. Then it'll go to ambient for a few seconds, like 20, 30 seconds. Then it'll go to vacuum, pressure. I mean, it does that. I have ours set up that the first formalin has no vacuum and no pressure on it. So you can only open this chamber when it is in the ambient lighting. If it's on vacuum, just wait for it to get to ambient and then you can open it. Otherwise, if you try to open it, it can pop that lid off and slam it into there. You can damage the machine, not to mention you personally could get hurt. Let me show you what it looks like. So now I'm going to open this and it's going to beep at me telling me, oh, you're opening this, you shouldn't do this. But I'm going to open it and show you what it's looking like and that you can now add tissue to it because it says ambient, if it'll let me open it. So it's beeping at me, alarming. And there's what it looks like filled. So now I can take off this lid and add more tissue cassettes if I needed to. So I'm going to close it up again and it'll quit alarming at us. Yeah, you want to do that fairly rapidly because you're affecting the time of the machine also. But it can be done. Again, make sure it's in ambient before you try to open this. It says vacuum or pressure lit up. Do not open it. All right, let's say you made a mistake. You're like, oh man, I meant to do it on a delayed process. I selected the wrong program. I made a mistake and I need this thing to drain. What do? Okay, on page 3.7, it tells you exactly what to do. A pump in and a pump out. So we're going to pump in, let's see, is it 3.7? Oh, the pump out. So when you're in station 1, you have to manually pump this machine out. So in order to do that, it says here, you have to place the magnet on the manual button here. Then you have to, now see, I followed these directions and I had a little bit of problems. So I put this on the manual mode and it didn't do what I needed. So what I ended up doing was I put it on the manual mode, but I ended up sliding the button to the left, or this bar to the left and then to the right. It was kind of like trial and error. Then I keyed in the command 01. And then I pressed the on key, which is this one right here. And it pumped it out. Now it doesn't say to do that in the book, but that was something by trial and error I found out you needed to do. So now it's pumping that formalin back into the container. Again, you're going to see the bubbling water and you're going to see it pump it back in. And then once it does that, you can start over again and reprogramming it, set it up for a delayed process. Okay, I want to remind you, if you do a delayed process and you're only wanting 70% alcohol, you don't want formalin on your tissue at this point because you've already fixed it good, you stored it in a 70% container, and you don't want it to go back to formalin again, which really wouldn't hurt it. It's not that big of a deal, but a lot of investigators for their research want things how they like it. If you don't want it to be back in formalin on a delayed process, then you have to make this first reservoir 70% for it to be stored in if you're doing delay. If you do an immediate start, if you select 7, 8, 9, or the last 0 program, then if you do the immediate start, then it will be in the 70% alcohol and begin processing from there. And if you look on my sheets, I've even made a notation about just what I said. If you're not fully understanding it, I made a notation on the bottom of the sheet for you to kind of absorb that information that I just said. Also in the manual, I have put, again, that rotation of the paraffin. So it's putting the formalin back in because we manually drain that retort. Now, if you were in another, if there was an error code or something and you needed to drain that, there's another section in this manual. If, let's say, you're in station 3, 4, or 5 and you needed to drain it out, then there's another procedure for doing that in this book. And you don't need to do the manual situation. So just go through this manual should that happen. It's never happened to me, but if you got the error code and you needed to drain it, just look at this book. Let me see if I can figure out where that was. That was on 3.5 if you needed to drain it on any other station but one. Okay, so it's done. Now we're back to square one. So I'm going to actually put my tissue in and show you what to do for a delayed start now. Okay, so remember we just had these as kind of practice, just kind of showing you what to do. I put these cassettes and they've been in here, you know, keeping in the solution for now because I didn't want them dried out. You don't want to leave the tissue out for more than a minute, not even a minute. You just want to get it in the cassette and get it in the fixative as quickly as possible. So I have my 3 tissue cassettes for my test cassettes. I'm putting them in, again, I like to put them facing the same way, in the same direction, but some people don't think that that's fully necessary. I'm going to wipe out this. I'm going to make sure that there's no paraffin residue on this gasket. That's very important. So I'll take this and just kind of go around the gasket, give it a wipe. Another thing about this gasket that you can do is just the oil from your finger is enough, is once in a while just go around that gasket and with your finger. Once in a while is all it's needed. So I'm going to close it. All right, let's say we've got our tissue loaded in the basket as we demonstrated. Let's say we want to do a delayed program on this, and it wasn't a test study, fixative test study. Let's just say it's just regular tissue that we're wanting to put on a delayed program. What you're going to do is you're going to put this magnet on the program. And today is Saturday. I want this to come off at 11 o'clock on Monday morning. So that's 2 days from now, or the second day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push end time. That's going to give me for my delayed program. The date, since it's 2 days, because today is Saturday and I don't want it to come off tomorrow. I don't want it Sunday, I want it Monday. So I'm going to make that as a 2. That's 02. Now, if this happened to be Friday and I wanted it to come off Monday, of course I would make that 03. And I've explained that. I have a sheet of paper on the side of the refrigerator, and I have a sheet of paper in the front pocket of the manual that explains this step by step. Okay, so I did 02 for the date. That means it's not coming off tomorrow, it's coming off the next day. So I'm going to say enter, on or enter. That's this red button here. AM, yes, I want it to come off in the morning. Yes. Now, what time did I want it to come off? I want it to come off at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to push 1100. Now, if it beeps at you and there's a problem, if it didn't like the time that you put in, that means you didn't give it enough time in that program. Let's say I wanted it to come off tomorrow, and it's a, let's say hypothetically I had a 15-hour program and I want it to come off tomorrow at a certain time. And when I punched in the time, it started beeping at me. Well, it didn't like that time. You punched in a number that maybe was like 13 hours away, when really it's a 15-hour process. So you have to adjust the time accordingly. So end time, we said 11 o'clock. I'm going to say, okay. So we push the on and enter. So now you'll notice that it doesn't say 02 anymore. Well, what that means is in one day, 3 hours and 44 minutes, this processor is going to start. So I'm going to remove the magnet, and it's giving me the start light. Now I have to press this within 30 seconds or it's going to disappear. So I give it one tap. If in 30 seconds it disappears, you got to start that again. You got to put the magnet on, do end time, AM, the time you want it off, and just start the process over again. And it's cycling through, showing you at each station what each station's time is. And it's going to start its delayed process, which will end at 11 o'clock Monday morning. And that's it. There's complete instructions in the manual, and there's complete abbreviated instructions on the side of the refrigerator and in the pocket. Another thing about this processor, very quickly, and which this lab has done, I just wanted to mention, it always needs to be plugged into a red plug. So that way it doesn't mess up a whole bunch of tissue if the power goes out. If you have any error codes in this on this processor, say you overfilled a reagent or the pump mechanism goes bad, or other various things, you can refer to the manual. It has some error codes and troubleshooting. If you don't know what to do at that point, call Matt Mintzer at Tech One Biomedical. He's an expert with these machines, and he'll set you straight and help you out. All right, so we just put 3 blocks on the processor. So, and remember when we talked about logging it. So now I'm going to put on here that it says number of cassettes approximately. So I'm going to put 3. And then the program number I'm going to put as 3 also, because that's the program we selected on the delayed start or immediate start, whatever. This is highly important. I'm going to put Donna's tissue. And really, this needs to be, this sheet could be at some point adjusted a little bit better. And the reason I do this is if this batch of tissue on this date happened to have some kind of problem, then I want to know, was it a processing problem or was it a problem with a mix-up, with the reagents, or was it a fixation problem? If I happen to do like 3 people's batch of tissue and 2 of those investigators, let's say Monica, ENU, and Miranda, let's just say hypothetically, and Ming Han, let's say all 4 of them, if Ming Han's tissue has a problem, but the others do not, then I know it's not a processing issue, because I put their name down here of which batch that day that I processed. I really think that this form, somebody needs to redo this form at some point to not only show that this is 70% now on here, but also add another column, a whiter column on the bottom to let you know whose tissue was processed that day. And what, for that very reason, I actually had this happen at another lab where they were questioning, was it a processing problem or was it a fixation problem, or and it turned out that 2 other investigators' tissue was fine, but one of them was not, so it led everybody to believe that they just didn't fix it enough and didn't take the care with it. So this can be a very important log ultimately. Okay, so processing is finished, and this is what it's going to look like. You're going to come up to the machine, you're going to see that it says drain. And what that's going to do is going to drain the processor. So we're going to push that once. And it's going to pump out, and you can see the light saying it's pump out, and you can hear it. And it takes about a minute or so to pump out. Now, while it's pumping out, I do have regular gloves on, as you can see. So that way you just don't get paraffin all over. Now it's going to beep and lets you know that it's finished pumping out. Okay, so this is the slide bar to open up the chamber. So you're going to slide that to the left, and it's going to alarm, and there's no way to turn that alarm off. You're going to flip these clamps down, and then you can open it up. Now, there's some little residual paraffin here, so I like to kind of quickly scrape that off, even though I'm going to take my specimens out, but I like to get rid of some of that because I'm going to be doing a clean cycle on it in just a couple minutes. So, as I'm taking the basket out, this is our basket, and with holding our samples, here's the lid, and there's our samples in a row. Now this thing will hold up to about 100, little over 100 samples. I put about 18 per row. I don't like to cram it in so much that you don't have a nice flow between them. Also, there's a little pool of paraffin in the bottom of the machine, and because it's going to go through the clean cycle, I don't want all that residual paraffin into all the clean reagents, so I'd like to give that a wipe out also. Just give it a wipe, and that way your clean reagents and clean cycle will last a little bit longer than usual. And you throw that away. And again, there's some on here, so I don't want that to affect these gaskets, this paraffin on these edges. So we have this, just a regular little paint scraper you can get at any hardware store. Don't use a metal one, use plastic. You don't want any scratching anything. Okay, and I'm going to take this in by the embedding center and then come back and we'll start the clean cycle. Okay, so I've removed the samples from the processor and I want to begin the clean cycle. The samples are over in the embedding center right now. I'm coming back and we're going to run the clean cycle. I've wiped out the bottom to get that excess paraffin. Now, since I'm going to be doing this clean cycle, I have some dirty forceps and a few base molds, we also call them boats, that I'm going to wash also because they've got a lot of paraffin and junk on them over time. So I'll put those in, and I'm going to put the lid back on. Then we're going to close it up. And slide the bar to the right. And then you can see now it says the clean cycle. So now what's going to happen with this clean cycle is it's going to bring in this alcohol, this purge alcohol. Actually, it's going to start off with the xylene, the purge xylene. And it's going to bring that in, and it's going to eat off some of the paraffin, then it's going to bring it back, and it's going to bring in this 100% alcohol. And it's going to cycle through that about 16 times, so it takes about an hour to finish a complete clean cycle. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to tap it just once and get that started. Now, never tap that until you've removed all your samples and stuff, which is obvious. Another thing is it's going to start warming up, so it's not going to do anything until it warms the chamber up, and then it'll start bringing in the purge xylene, then purge alcohol. So, and you can see it says clean, and it's warming up. And once it starts cycling through, it'll start counting, and then you'll see it each time it brings it in, a reagent, then it'll tell you, it goes 16 times, so it'll go 1, 2, and then for each set of xylene and alcohol.